Sing with me, Mom. Hey, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about So is it really about the gender roles, or is it about your strengths and weaknesses? Because that also sounded like you were talking about what your strengths are and what Dad's strengths are, what your weaknesses are.
I think there's a bit of gender role, but there's also a bit about strength. And I'm really a bit scared in using gender role in the sense that, like, as I said, I'm a bit of a feminist, but a positive feminist. So the way I've raised my kids, when I had Ben, after having 2 girls, I did not want to have a boy that cannot do anything in the house, because I've seen it so many times where a boy just sits there and do nothing, and I was like, no ways, this is not happening in our house. So from a little age, for as little as 2 years, if Ben sat on his little table and ate, he knew that after eating, he takes his plate to the kitchen, he wipes his own little table, he puts his stuff away. Because if we don't teach boys at a younger age, we're going to be sending bad husbands out there in the world that cannot do anything and just sits around and do nothing. And I've been so blessed to have such a good husband who can do that, and I want my son to be a good husband to someone else. So when gender role, it doesn't mean, it's not the traditional, like, African way a woman sits in the kitchen and then a man, after work just comes and sit down. No, it's not something like that. It's not even in the Bible anyway, but I think, a woman still has a role in the household, more like a managerial role, and and she delegates what everyone does, including the husband. She can say, oh, you help me with that, you help me with this. She can do those things, and the man is still the head of the family, because that's what the Bible says. He's the head of the family, but the head of the family doesn't mean abusing people within the family. The head of the family, in the sense of Christ, was the head of the church, and so he gave his life because he loved us. And so that's the role of a man in his family. He loves us the same way that Christ loved his church. And so when you love people, you do the same thing that God does to people. And that's his role, as, to look after us with that love.
Beautiful. I like that one.
You like that one?
Yeah, that sounds more loving instead of like,
I'm the head of the house.
I control everything.
Yeah.
So what about, oh, by the way, congratulations, you have raised a wonderful son. I think he's going to be a fantastic husband to whoever he goes to.
I think she's going to be lucky.
Yeah, she's going to be so lucky. So let's talk about our childhoods. The reason I'm talking about this is because a few things have creeped into my own life, and I can see that it can affect a relationship. So in a marriage covenant, how can your childhood affect your marriage? The things that have happened in your childhood, or the ways that you have grown up. Yeah.
So, okay, I'll break it into 2. So,
I forgot to say, if so, what must we do to ensure that there is healing from our childhood?
Okay. So there's 2 things. So if we're talking about healing,
Yes.
that means there's something traumatic that must have happened in someone's childhood. So if something happened, as I said before, I used abuse because it's such an awful thing, but yet a very common thing in our world today. So if someone has been abused, it just doesn't affect their marriage relationship. It affects all sorts of relationship. You find that there are people that have been abused that don't even like people touching them because they're so protective of themselves because of things that have happened to them. So now if that person gets into a relationship and now is living very closely with a man or a woman, you can imagine how that might affect, it may affect their sex life. That's why it's really important, if you have gone through any traumatic thing when you were in your childhood, it's really important to seek counsel, or there's a lot of help out there. so that you can deal with it. For a lot of people, they keep it to themselves, and they could be out there, you think they're fine, you will not even know that there's something that has happened. But that's not how you deal with it. You have to seek professional help and really get to the bottom of it, because if you don't, it will creep up at some stage in your life and in your relationship. And unfortunately, a lot of those things that people don't deal with, they tend to creep up more when you get married, because now you are now intimately living with someone really closely. When you've got friends, they can easily not see those things. But when you live with someone intimately, those things will eventually creep up in one way or the other. So that's why it's really important to deal with those things. But on the other hand, when you were asking that question, I was actually thinking, also your environment. So you have to remember that when people get married, they both come from very different backgrounds, in terms of the way they were raised, the way things were done in their household or in their family in general. And sometimes those things, they creep up in our family, in our new family. So if you were used to see your dad doing certain thing, you might, and your mom sitting there and being quiet about it, or your dad just sitting and your mom doing everything. As a guy, you might think that that's going to be the same in your relationship. Or maybe as a lady, if you were used to see your dad, help, in the kitchen, or if he was the one doing all the cooking, you might expect the same thing in your relationship. So it's really important in that case that we remember that we have married an individual, that and we have to treat them as such. So when you realize you've married an individual, then you cannot expect what you saw in your family with him, because they're very, because he's his own individual. And I think if you remember that, that's going to really help you with your expectation of what you expect, because of what you've seen in the past.
Okay. You already spoke about individuality,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm only asking you this because actually, let me just say, personally, my favorite thing about you and Dad is your individuality, and I want that for myself too. I've seen you over the years just be yourself. You have a voice, first of all. You express it. and he, he's not, what's the word? Doesn't feel...
Like he's scared about it?
Yeah.
Or, I see what you mean.
Yeah, doesn't feel feared about it or anything like that.
Yeah.
He also just accepts you just the way you are. So how important is it to maintain your individuality? And can it get lost? If so, how do you regain it?
So first of all, as a person, you grow all the time. So you're not going to be the same. So that's why as people that live together in a relationship, we have to be very open-minded about that, because the husband I married 22 years ago has evolved in good ways. And human beings, we don't always like changes. And so when a change happens, we tend to want to revolt. But I have to be open-minded, because, he's growing and I'm growing, and we need to be there to support each other. But if your individuality is taken away, it's like being suffocated. It's not nice. It's like if I'm a pink butterfly and you want a blue butterfly, I'm not going to change and be a blue butterfly. What you need to do is get a blue butterfly from the beginning. But don't get a pink butterfly expecting that it's going to change into blue. That's not going to happen. So we've all been created as individuals, and God has a will for each of our lives. And so if that doesn't occur, you stop being yourself fully. And that's why it's really important to maintain your individuality. You have to still be yourself within the context of a married relationship. It's true, some people lose their individuality, and and it does have a lot of negative impact when they do. You can see it. It's almost like they just living for the next person, for that other person, and they're not a person in their own rights. What else did you ask?
I was just asking, how do you regain your individuality if you have lost it?
That is a hard question. It is a hard question, but I think it's all about rediscovering who you are. I know that, for instance, as a mom, probably at some stage I may have lost it because I was so engulfed in the children and what the children want. And it took me a really long time to, separate the two, to be myself and be a mother at the same time, to, do the things that I want to do and not feel bad about it because I'm a mother and I've got children, because this is who I am and these are the things that I want to do. And I don't think you can ever have a fulfilled life if you are living out of your individuality. You will never have a fulfilled life. Your life will always be empty, and you will always miss something. And I think I had to rediscover who I was, go on a journey on rediscovering who I was, to then regain confidence in who I am and become who I wanted to be.
Okay. Now let's go on to the juicy conversation.
She calls it the juicy part.
Sing with me, mom. Hey, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about Low.
That's an old song.
Yes.
That is a millennial song, Joy.
But I know it.
Yeah, but it's a millennial song. You're not allowed to sing it. It's for us. Yes.
Why do you think God ordained sex only between a husband and a wife?
Okay. Now, there's that thing about what God does. You can't always know the why behind it. Because if you knew each and every why behind why God did certain things, he will cease to be God. But, God created the world in 6 days, and everything that he created in the world at the beginning was for the enjoyment of the man that he created on the last day. And so, when he created Eve, he also wanted to create something really intimate that will bring these two people together. And I think sex is probably the only thing that I know that bring, a husband and a wife together. It's an intimate relationship. It's companionship, but it's very intimate. It's not normal companionship. And I think it was just God's gift to a married couple to make that relationship really special.
Okay. Actually, I should have started with, is sex good? And I don't mean the actual act, but I mean, because obviously.
And the act is good.
I know that obviously I'm not experiencing it, so whatever.
It's good.
Okay, thanks. I'm jealous. That jokes. My point is, why is it such a taboo topic, especially in the African community? Should it be normalized?
I think it should be. I think it should be normalized because if you look through the Bible, there's a lot of things that, God talks about that, sex and intimate relationship in the Bible. If you read Ecclesiastic, it's all about sex. It's not about sex as in sex, but it talks about how.
Solomon.
Yeah, Songs of Solomon. Sorry, not Ecclesiastes. No, that one is not that deep. Yeah, Songs of Solomon. There is a lot of how the man should enjoy his woman and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things throughout the whole Bible in the Old and the New Testament. So it was a good thing when God created it at the beginning. But then sin crept in. And with sin, sexuality became something that wasn't clean anymore. Because then there were so many other things that came with sin, the prostitution, a lot of things that made sex a taboo and not, an open topic for people to talk about. So I think that's why it probably became a taboo, because of the sin and what sex became after the sin.
Oh, okay.
Because it ceased to become between a married couple, and it became something else. So, and with that, it just became a taboo.
But you don't think it's taboo? You think it should be
I think it
talked
should be.
about in the open?
I think it should be talked about in the open, but in a safe place. Obviously, you don't want to be talking about sex if you've got little children around you. There's a time and a place to do that. But I think we should have a lot of conversation, because one of the issues that happen in marriage, and I think if you were to probably list the first 3-4 issues that happen, if it's not to do with finance, it's usually to do with communication, it's to do with sex, or communication, finance, sex. Yeah, I think they are probably the 3 top things that break marriages. So if it's in the 3 things that breaks a marriage, surely we should be doing a lot of talking about it before marriage.
Okay. So, actually, are we supposed to teach kids about sex? This has nothing to do with this, but I was just wondering, are we supposed to teach children about sex? How come they don't talk about sex in church? Because I only hear about, I've never heard about it in church. Actually, I think they did try, but it was only last year. But, yeah. Should you tell children and youth?
Yeah, you do. You do need to tell children about sex, but I think there's a level, and I think when you have children, they will ask you questions when they are very little, about the different parts and a lot of things they've heard there and there, and usually they catch you at the wrongest time when you have nothing to say. So I think at different level and age, you really have to talk about sex, but more importantly, probably when people are, before they hit puberty, it should be a topic that we discuss with our kids. Yeah, it's really important.
Okay. Do you also believe that every time you have sex with someone, your soul is left with them or connected to them or something like that? Only because soul ties is a conversation in some churches. I don't know, I haven't really heard it in our church. But in other churches, it's a really big thing, and it's just, I guess, a way to scare people off from having sex before marriage. To say that if you do have sex before marriage, all the different people that you're having sex with, your soul is connecting to each and every one of them. Therefore, every time you connect to that soul, it's like a piece of you is left with them, and you are no longer whole, but half.
Okay, so now I don't mean to preach, but it's really hard for me to answer this question if I don't go back to the Bible. If I look through the Bible everywhere, there is no soul tie anywhere. That word does not even exist. A soul in the Bible is, a human is made of their body and then the breath that they breathe. So when God made Adam, he formed him from the ground, the soil, and then he breathed into the man, and that's what made a soul. Those two combined make us. It makes a human being. It makes a soul. So a soul is not some spirit that lives in me, and then you've got your soul that lives in you, and then they can meet somewhere. There's no such thing. A living soul is the body and the breath of God that He breathed into human beings, and those two together will make a living being, a living soul. So the Bible doesn't talk anywhere about soul ties at all, not even for marriage, because the only thing He says about marriage is that there will be one in flesh, in body. He doesn't even say anything about 2 people when they get married, they will be together in souls. There's no verse in the Bible where it talks about it. So it's not a biblical concept. I know a few people have used it when they've spoken about like the relationship that Jonathan had with, is it David? because they had a very close relationship, but the Bible does not even refer to their relationship as a soul tie. They just had a close relationship that they call something else, but it wasn't soul tie. So soul tie is not a biblical thing at all. So I really don't believe in it because it's not biblical.
Okay. Simple. So in the African community and in the church community, sex is something that is, preached to women only, not sex itself. The abstinence of it, not having it, is something that's only preached to women. Men, however, can live as they please, I guess, because they don't really get the same education that we do. And then in the African community, it's preached as something that is only for a man's pleasure. I've never really heard of it as like pleasuring for a woman or pleasuring at all, but something that you must do. You know how when you go to bridal showers, those aunties are not coming to mind one day. Agreed?
Yes, agreed.
So, you know, you have bridal showers and they say things like that, like, when your husband wants it, you give it to him, blah, blah, blah. All of those things, I just think it's dangerous because it shifts the focus from you and your husband to just the husband. And there's a disconnect because it doesn't feel like you're connecting with the person anymore. It just feels like you're pleasing the person, like, you know. So, what I'm trying to say is, let me see what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, okay, so what do you think is the most important advice that you would give? Obviously, we try to do things God's way, so no sex before marriage, but a young married couple or just married couple, what advice would you give them in terms of sex? What's the most important thing or the most important things that they should know in order to have a healthy sex life, an active sex life?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Sex is there for pleasure, for giving pleasure and receiving pleasure. If anyone is ever in a relationship where it's just for one person, then it ceases to be what God made it for. And I know there's a verse in the Bible, I know my husband loves that verse, where they talk about the fact, where they says that, my body is not for me, it's for my husband. And then it turns, Paul then says the same to the man. That, their body is not for them, it's not for them, but it's for their wives. So it's a vice versa thing. And if you look at through that verse, they say that it's because, it was normal in that time as well for men to expect that of a woman. But then when he now say to men, hey, your bodies are not yours either, your bodies are your wives, then it shifted the whole concept in the sense that even it stopped men to think that they could go around in that time because they thought they could just dish it out everywhere and it was okay. So it kind of stopped that, say, equally you as well, you owe it, your bodies are for this one person. So, so sex is not, it's there for the two people. It's meant to, it's meant for the enjoyment of the two people together. And that's very important. And I think an advice that I can give in regards to sex to young people that are getting married is that, if there's something else, if there's something within your sex relationship that is not working, you need to talk about it. You need to be open enough to say, hey, but I don't like this, this part, I don't like that part. Can we try this? Can we do that? So you need to have a very open discussion about those things. But, after you are married for many years, you realize that women and men are very different. In the sense that, for a man in general, sex is a need. It's something that they need. It's like when you have a car, you need to fuel it. If you don't fuel it, your car is going to stop. So that's basically it. For women, it doesn't always be the same. It's not always the same. And you know how God said to the men, he said to the women, you have to respect your husband. But then he went and said to to the men, and he said to the men first that they have to love their wives. And once you love your wife, to all the guys out there that are young, wanting to get
Are
married,
you listening?
or about to get married, or are into relationship, if you love your wives, so when you love someone, that means you do things that people do when they're in love. You know, you look after them, you buy flowers, whatever it is that will please your girl or your woman. When you do all those things, then you have a better sex life. Very important. It's not like a give and take, but it is just what it is. When you do those things, because that's what God says to the man, you know, you have to love your wife. And sometimes after marriage, men tends to think that they don't have to work anymore. You know, I've got my wife, I don't need to take her out anymore, I don't need to bring that flower anymore. Well, you still need to do all those things.
Don't bring that energy over here.
You still need to do all those things.
Yep.
And the more you do those things, the more a woman feels loved, because that's the most important thing that a woman wants to feel, is being loved. So if your woman is feeling loved, you get sex as much as you want. And easy. So that's probably the most important thing that I would like to leave.
Fabulous. Thank you. We have come to the end of our conversation. Thank you, Mom, Yvette to everybody, Mom to me, or Auntie to some. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. This was low-key, interestingly
Thank you
awkward,
for
but
having
also
me.
fun.
Thank you, Joy.
You're welcome. So to everybody that has watched, I hope you gained something new from this. Hope this was fruitful for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and join the family. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.